report, which unfortunately there has been no Palestinian and Arab serious undertaking to use it as a resource to show a great deal of the distortions that the whole cumulative effect of what Rashid Al-Khaldi has mentioned about the books and the distortions and the new narrative. These are principal sources for a narrative which can break through into what Edward Said used to call the constituency of conscience in the Western world, and particularly in the United States.
Thank you. في مداخلات باللغة العربية. تفضل.
I have a couple of questions. First to Dr. Tackenberg, whether your scope of research covered diaspora Palestinians and Palestinians in Lebanon in particular, given their dire situation, the situation they find themselves in, hemmed on both sides, under pretexts of implantation and whatnot, This is one thing. Another question to Rashid. What has been done to counter the mystification on part of Zionism in the US? You mentioned some authors and writers, this is okay, but in my opinion, this is not enough. I mean, in terms of effort taken to counter this question of mystification that has been going on for the last 40 years or so. In terms of what Shara said, it's really a grim scenario that you have drawn about Palestinian academia being eroded, if I might be correct using this term. Is there something to reverse the situation right now? Thank you.
Okay, we'll take one more intervention from the audience, please, at the end. And could you introduce yourself? Ms. Andoni.
Miss Andoni. Rashid Khalidi. I find Miss Andoni.
Thank you.
Rashid, I have. You said that the peace process and the negotiations have humanized the Palestinians in the eye of the West. At the same time, the peace process and the negotiations have also qualified this humanity of the Palestinians and defined who's acceptable or not. Not only even before the Intifada, even before the militarization of the Intifada. Even Edward Said was vilified for not accepting the terms of the peace process. And when Arafat rejected the terms of surrender, not the infamous offer by Barak, he became this indispensable. Even his life became indispensable. So I find this, either I didn't understand you or I find it problematic. Would you please answer? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll make an exception. Ustaz Maher, تفضل.
أنا سؤالي لرشيد أيضا. يعني من خلال عرضك واضح اليوم إنه التاريخ الجديد في إسرائيل يعني تجاوز المرحلة الأولى التي بدأ منها، وهي مرحلة مراجعة حرب 48 ومسؤولية إسرائيل عن المأساة الفلسطينية. لكن اليوم والأسماء الأخرى اللي ذكرتها خصوصا شلومو ساند والآخرين بدينا نشعر وكأنه التاريخ الجديد في إسرائيل دخل في مرحلة مراجعة الأساطير المؤسسة للصهيونية، بما في ذلك أسطورة التواصل التاريخي بين يهود إسرائيل اليوم وبين اليهود قبل 4000 سنة أو 2000 سنة. سؤالي إنه يعني أنا بعتقد إنه التاريخ الجديد في إسرائيل على الرغم من هالروح النقدية فيه، ولكن أيضا هو عامل قوة لإسرائيل، عامل قوة للمجتمع الإسرائيلي، خصوصا بالنسبة للمتلقي الغربي اللي بيشعر أنه المؤرخ الإسرائيلي اليوم بدأ يشكك في الأساطير المؤسسة للصهيونية. إلى أي حد يمكن لتأريخ فلسطيني جديد عن القضية الفلسطينية يعيد النظر أيضا ببعض التابوات في هذا التاريخ الفلسطيني، يمكن أيضا أن يترك تأثير على فهم الأمريكي أو الأوروبي لجوهر هذه القضية.
شكرا شكرا. I'll open now the floor for the participants to answer the question. Let's start with Dr. Tackenberg because he was short-changed at the end.
Exactly, just one, your question whether my research, whether my book has also covered the Palestinians in the diaspora, including Lebanon, which it does, but the emphasis is on trying to understand and describe what constitutes the status, the legal position of Palestinians under international law. So the point of reference is the relevant areas of international law, refugee law, the law related to statelessness, the law, international humanitarian law, to the extent Palestinians are civilians under occupation, and international human rights law, various areas of international human rights law. So I have very much an international legal focus, but I apply that to the factual challenges that Palestinians face in the OPT, in the other host countries, including Lebanon, and more further afield.
I think there are only a couple of questions for me. But let me just mention in regard to the Goldstone report, I think if we're going to wait for Palestinian and Arab diplomacy to make something of the Goldstone report and the International Court of Justice judgment, we'll all grow much older than we are now. I think we should make of it what we can, because we, whoever we are, have much more effect than all of these governments, these useless governments. And I have to say, the Goldstone report has had a major impact, in my opinion, on public opinion even in the United States, where it was completely excluded from the mainstream media, but where it has had enormous circulation, for example, within the Jewish community, and has caused a huge infisam, a huge split over Gaza. The Gaza war had an enormous impact in spite of the brilliant public relations operation, which was the core of the Gaza war. The Gaza wasn't a war. Gaza was an attack on a defenseless civilian population dressed up as a war, and built into a brilliant, probably one of the greatest public relations operation of a movement which has always been focused on public relations. In spite of that, public opinion in the United States, I think, has been very negatively affected by the war and also by the Goldstone report, in spite of the blackout on it in the official media. And this is an example of what was said during the previous session about the gap between elite opinion and political discourse on the one hand in France, and public opinion, or in Europe. It's also true in the United States. And in public opinion in the United States, it's hard to see these things, but you go to a university or you go online and you will see that this stuff is spreading virally, as it were. George Gedda asks me, what has been done to counter the mystification in the United States? I mean, those of us who do what we do what we can do. But I think that to expect more of what those of us who are doing what we can do is to expect the impossible. I think that what we need is more parents who don't send their children to do engineering and medicine, and to have more money invested in Arab universities by Arab governments that waste their money on electrodes and barriers and riot police and useless weapons that they never will be able to use. If Arab governments would spend money on human capital, and Arab parents who have the capital would spend it on their children or invest it in universities, here, there, anywhere, in scholarships and so on and so forth, then in time we would have an impact, not just a few of us, the people who've been working for 30, 40, 50, 60 years, and people of my generation, and the few younger ones who are there. So I think the question should be turned inward to our society. And we should ask, why is our society not producing more in all of these? Why are we not investing in research institutes, like the Institute for Palestine Studies, for example? Lemis asked me about the peace process. I am not a fan of the peace process, Lemis. If you've read any of my writings, you'll know that I am one of the harshest critics of everything that's happened since Washington. There are a few harsher than me, but I think I've done it scientifically. Other people just bark. I actually try and analyze, it's like a few other people. So I'm not a particular fan of the peace process. It is a fact, however, that the Palestinians were humanized by the Madrid, Washington, Oslo process. Now, it's true, if you read the paper, which actually goes into it, that those gains were reversed later on, and you're right. Arafat was dehumanized again, the Palestinians were dehumanized. This was not a function of the peace process. This was a function of the Second Intifada, which was a major defeat for the Palestinian people. One of several major defeats the Palestinian people have suffered. I've had arguments over my analysis of the 1936-1939 revolt as a defeat. It was a great heroic effort by the Palestinian people, but it did not lead to victory. And many, many people sacrificed in the Second Intifada, and it was a terrible defeat. It was strategically misguided, and it was a terrible defeat. And that helped to harm the image of the Palestinians. But as I said in the paper, and as I was able to say in my talk, in spite of that, some of the positive evolutions that I've talked about have continued. Finally, بالنسبة لسؤال الدكتور ماهر، معك حق إنه موجة كتابة التاريخ الجديد في إسرائيل ممكن اعتباره عامل قوي لإسرائيل، لأنه يرون إسرائيل حيث يوجد مؤرخون وعلماء وكتاب وأدباء ينتقدون النظام الصهيوني وينتقدون جذور الصهيوني وينتقدون السياسات والممارسات الإسرائيلية إلى آخره، ويقولون في المقابل لا يوجد شيئا في العالم العربي. هو طبعا مش صحيح. الذين يكتبون في إسرائيل حفنة أقلية كتار طبعا في الجامعات، من أهم العلماء الإسرائيليين ممكن اعتبارهم من منتقدي النظام الإسرائيلي على الأقل، أو على الأقل ممارسات وسياسات إسرائيل. بينما في العالم العربي يوجد تيار هائل وواسع من النقد الذاتي ومن نقد الممارسات الأنظمية، ولكن هذا التيار مخفي بالنسبة للقارئ الأجنبي. أنا كان يعني حكمي على ما يوجد في رؤية الأمريكاني، القارئ الأمريكاني أو القارئ الإنجليزي، وهذا ما يوجد. وبرأيي أنا طبعا الكثير من المؤرخون الجدد في إسرائيل من هم يعني العباقرة ومن هم الفرسان. بني مورس على سبيل المثال عنصري صهيوني بغيض وآراءه يعني غير معقولة، إنما كتاباته حتى الآن أثرت تأثيرا جيدا على الرأي العام، بما في ذلك كتابه عن 48 مع كل عيوب، كل ثغرات وعيوب هذا الكتاب، وكذلك باقي المؤرخين الجدد. طبعا البيبر الكامل، الورقة الكاملة تتطرق إلى الكثير من الكتاب والعلماء والأكاديميين الأمريكان والعرب الذين يكتبون في اللغة الإنجليزية والذين يؤثرون أيضا، ولكن اضطريت إلى الاختصار، يؤثرون أيضا على الرأي العام الأمريكي. إنما يلعبون هؤلاء الإسرائيليين دورا هاما لأنهم إسرائيليين ولهم قدرة على انتقاد أشياء. تانيا راينهارت على سبيل المثال، أو شلومو ساند على سبيل المثال، وليس الحصر. يعني لهم، الله يرحمها تانيا، توفت المرحومة تانيا راينهارت، كان لهم قدرة هائلة على الانتقاد وغير قدرتنا طبعا. احنا يعني مشطوب علينا لأننا عرب أو مؤيدين للعرب أو هم إسرائيليين. وطبعا تسأل سؤال عن تاريخ فلسطين جديد. إن شاء الله نقدر احنا ننتقد أنفسنا دون تردد ودون أنا عندي تجربة مش كل هالقد إيجابية في هذا المجال. حاولت أقدم لمجلة معينة مقالي بتنتقد بعض ممارسات بعض القيادات التاريخية، ولم ترفض، لم يرفض المقال، إنما وجهت بعشرات الاستفسارات. ولا بطلت انشر المقال. يعني مش مسموح الواحد يعني ينتقد بعض الرموز التاريخيه القديمه. لا نتكلم عن حدا موجود على قيد الحياه منذ عشرات السنين. اذا يوجد محرمات وخطوط حمر للاسف الشديد في التاريخ الفلسطيني والعربي. ما انت عالم غيرك طبعا في هذا المجال.
شكرا رشيد. شكرا رشيد. تفضل دكتور دوماني.
I'll be brief. First of all, I just want to make sure I understood correctly. I did not think there's an erosion of Palestinian scholarship. If I said that, I didn't mean to say that. In fact, I'm very optimistic about the growing number of people who are working on Palestinian issues. At least in the United States, it's become a field with critical mass. And what we really need very badly in the United States is funding for the establishment of a Palestinian Studies Center, which would be, if established, the first one in the country. And it would have a very important role in crystallizing this
in a university, inside the university.
Yeah, as an academic.
Exactly.
Center. That's what I meant. It would play a very important role in crystallizing this growing mass of people and turning it into a very important subfield of studies, at least in the United States. So they all face a contradiction, however. In the academy, at least in the US academy, at least in the humanities, a little bit less so in the social sciences, most writings begin with a critique of nationalist constructions of the past. And which is perfectly fine and easy to do once you've already killed all the Indians or kicked out all the Palestinians, and then you can do all the post-national stuff you want. But since you're, that is to say, in the case of Palestinians, involved still in a conflict, ongoing conflict of trying to assert their rights to freedom, justice, return, etc., how can they adopt the basic core values of academia, which is a criticism of nationalist mobilization? They have to live inside this tension. And so this is a very big challenge to these historians and anthropologists and others. They have to find ways of being critical and not accepting any mythologies or myths, and at the same time they have to find topics, lines of inquiry, ways of talking about things that actually mobilize and help create or help Palestinians achieve their rights. And that's a very tough balancing act. Just very quickly on the question of the internet, I don't, again, probably was not very clear. I don't mean there's a dichotomy between academic production and the internet as a platform for delivery. I'm just saying it's a new terrain on which knowledge is produced and contested, and academics are very much part of that as like everybody else.
You said that the Israelis are moving to the internet because they lost
Not the internet.
academic grounds, because now everything is...
Yes, they're moving out to forms of media. They're investing very heavily in forms of media and other ways of affecting public discourse that they're not focusing on the universities as much as before. They don't have much faith in academicians inside of universities of being able to persuade them. They're very busy trying to shut them up or harass them or create difficult situations for them to establish new centers for Jewish studies or Israel studies and try to regain some ground. But as far as the conflict is concerned, I think they're doing most of their work outside the university, and we have to engage in that terrain as well, is all I'm trying to say. As to why certain stereotypes and how they may be related, I'm not a psychologist and I can't answer this question, but I would only offer this. Most of the writings by pro-Israel are not really meant to convince anybody outside the Jewish community. I would disagree with anybody who would say that the primary audience is an external audience. The primary audience is an internal audience.
And they're losing.
And they're losing that battle. So the idea of victimhood, for example, is not to bring tears from Anglo-Saxons and make them feel guilty. That is a byproduct. The real issue is when they collect all this money in the synagogues every Saturday, or when they do fundraising for issues, they want to make sure it goes to Israel as protector. And playing the victim is a very successful way for those inside the mainstream Jewish community who are very much invested in channeling huge funds from the United States to Israel, very much invested in making sure that when people contribute, it goes to that as opposed to goes to internal things inside the Jewish community in the United States. The first Intifada, for example, was a major crisis for fundraising for Israel. And many Jews in the United States started thinking, okay, now there's peace, we can build the old people center, we can start a new swimming pool, we can give out money for this or that project inside the United States. And there was a real hemorrhage. And there was great insistence on the issue of victimhood to make sure that that money keeps flowing. So I think it's a question of primary audience. And when some Arabs, as you say, play the Dor Butuli and it's also really not geared to the outside world, it's geared to an internal audience. And the question of John's question, I've noticed that all your examples are from 1940s.
That was the period I looked at.
Right, and I think it makes perfect sense. Most of my generalizations, and I emphasize the word generalizations, broad brush, I try to be, really are from the 18th and 19th century. And I do think that since the 1920s, there is a crisis, especially inside the Protestant movement. And if you look at the missionary part of that movement, I would give you the work, for example, of David Hollinger, who's a colleague of mine in the United States, who's written about this. There's a huge and very tense discussion within that movement about what is the role of missionaries in the world, and there are many people who are trying to push it in a quote-unquote more progressive human rights direction than a religious making people from another conversion direction. Okay, there is a big fight going on in the 20s, 30s, and 40s. And so your point is, and I would submit that the closer one looks, the more imperfections one sees. Yeah, and history is very messy, which holds great hope for people who want to change things. But those involved in writing about the past in sort of neat ways are invested in making it far less messy, because they're really justifying current political projects. Yeah. So I'll end with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Shara. بما انه هذه اخر جلسة، ود باسم مؤسسة الدراسات الفلسطينية ان اشكركم جميعا للبقاء لحتى هذه اللحظة والمشاركة في الحديث. أشكر جميع المتحدثين بما فيهم متحدثين في هذه الجلسة والمتحدثين السابقين، وخصوصا أشكر المترجمين والمترجمات في آخر الذين ذهبوا. شكرا لكم جميعا.